Hi, Pastor Charlie here from New Hope Lutheran Church with another edition of Pastor Charlie's Toolbox. So today, in case you've never heard of it before, I want to introduce you to something called a workmate. Now, some say that a workmate is a better choice to use than sawhorses when working on a project, so I want to look into that today. Now, this down here is called a workmate, which, well, you have to unfold it first, and I've already put the legs down on it just to get it a little higher, and the rest of it, so you can use it on this level, but the rest of it, you just bring it up like that. And basically, it's like a workbench with this vise already built into it. Just like that. You unfold it and presto. You've got something to clamp down boards so you can work on it. Or actually just about anything you can clamp on it, but let's use boards for today. So let's say you want to cut the end off this board. Stick it in here and you crank these together and the board is held solid. Now, this might not be the best way to cut it, because if I'm back here wanting to cut, I might push down and that'll all just come up. But other than that, works good. So the other thing you can do with it is that you can get it to clamp vertical as well as horizontally. Let me show you. By turning these, you can flip it up. So you can put something in here and clamp it down that way. You might have a reason to do that. It also has this little tool tray here to hold things, although when you flip it up, of course, everything will fall out, but it's kind of a neat thing. It also has storage underneath it. You can put big pieces of wood on here too. It has these holes in it for various attachments, and it's got these little jiggers. You just pop them in, and we can put something like this on there. So you pop that, and then you can work on it there. Great if you want to sand it or use a router or something so you don't cut into your tabletop. And that's held nice and solid as well. So, it's a pretty good machine, and I do use it from time to time. But sometimes, for me maybe most of the time, sawhorses are a better example. And I want to show you why. Because on the surface, the workmate appears to be a pretty good choice. And sawhorses don't have all the same features built in. But just hold on. For one thing, you can get a sawhorse like this for a half-decent price. Not as expensive as a workmate. And they're light. There's nothing to them. And they stow away. You can see how narrow they are. They stow away really nice. They also have a spot to put your tools or what have you. And with two of them, kind of like that, take a piece of plywood, put it on there. You've got a workbench and a workspace that's bigger than that one. Good size. But you're going to ask, how do you clamp anything on it? That one has a built-in clamp. Well, you use clamps. I myself like these quick grip ones. There, just like that. Put a second one on so it doesn't move back and forth. Done. Holds it up good. Now, if, let's say you want to plane this edge, so you want it sitting up like that. Can you do it with sawhorses? Sure can. Use a couple of C-clamps. They work good for that. Just put it underneath here. Tighten it down. And then you use the second one this way. Once you tighten that up, hope I'm going the right way. I'm not going the right way. Tighten that up. It's nice and solid and sturdy. So, you can pretty much do everything a workmate can, and in some ways even more, because you can get a bigger workspace using that. Throw down a few 2x4s, you can put a whole sheet of plywood on and have a huge space to work from. So it would seem that in the end, the sawhorses are actually a lot more versatile because they set up quite fast too. And while we might not have seen that to begin with, we didn't see them because the advantages were hidden, unless someone tells you or you find them yourself. Now, speaking of hidden advantages, today we're looking at Matthew 20 verses 1 to 16. And that is the parable of the workers in the vineyard. Do you remember that one? It started with an owner of a vineyard who went out to find some people to harvest the grapes in his vineyard. So he went to the marketplace, as was the custom of that day, and he asked some people to come work for him. And he said, I'll give you a fair day's wage for coming to work in the vineyard. Well, halfway through the morning, he realized he didn't have enough people. So he went to the marketplace to find more people. And he did. And then at noon, the same thing happened. And even later in the afternoon, the same thing happened. He kept bringing people in all day long. Then at the end of the day, everyone was to get paid, so he asked them to line up. But he asked them to line up with those who had worked the least to be first in line, and those who'd worked the whole day to be at the end of the line. What surprised the people at the end of the line was that those who only worked part of the day, some not even half the day, they got the full day's wage. Well, they thought, okay, this could be good for us because he should pay us more. But when they got to him, he paid them what he had promised them, and they grumbled about that. But he reminded them that they had a deal, and they were getting a fair day's wage. He said, is it your problem that I'm generous and I want to pay people who were only here part of the day the same? That's not your problem. So on the surface, that story might seem like a story about unfair work practices, you know. It just doesn't seem right. But what we want to realize is that this is an illustration about what the kingdom of God is like. And when we look at it that way, we see it as a story of God's great love for all humans, for everybody, that everybody gets a chance. Everybody can receive the same reward regardless. And on top of that, and what often isn't pointed out, is that Well, working in God's vineyard is not like some teeth-grinding, soulless job you can't wait to leave. Ah, no, no, no. Not at all. This work is about showing generous love to other people. It's about helping others find joy in life the same way we found joy. It's not competitively brutal. Instead, it's about bringing hope and promise to people. God's vineyard is not a place you want to simply rush away from and get out of, but rather it's something you wish that would continue on and on and on. It's a little like me being out here in the garage. You know, who wants to leave? There's so many interesting things to do. And in looking at it that way, really, the longest working people in that parable of the vineyard, they actually receive a lot more than those who show up later in the day. They've known God's presence longer in their lives. They've had God to turn to when things get difficult for a much longer time. So, kind of like the sawhorses, in spite of what might seem to be off-putting on the surface, the advantages are available for all people.